Hey guys, I want to talk about China. Surely you may have seen some headlines about President Xi Jin Ping taking his third term and basically booting out Hu Jin Tao in the middle of the whole Congress, 2,000 plus people, and basically purging him. And we can see from probably you've seen the footage. I want to go into analyzing what's happened in the footage. We're going to go for frame by frame. We're going to take in my understanding and knowledge of what's been happening, as well as the future economic impacts and potential, geopolitical impacts from this situation. This is probably the most historic moment we've seen, well, at least since the invasion of Ukraine by, Putin. But, in the last couple of years, this is majorly historic and there's probably no turning back from it. So we're going to look at why the stock market dropped too, what sort of people got in to power this time and where China's going to go from now on in, why China has completely changed from here going forward. But let's, right now, look at the video. So we're just going to jump onto the laptop and we're using some footage from The Guardian. We can see that Hu Jin Tao is looking at this little red book, or it's rather large, probably A4 size. And we can see it's being dragged away by one of the other members, trying to explain away what's been happening. So he tries to get his book back. So what's so important about this book? In this book, it actually stipulates who you are voting for when you put your hand up. Are you happy with these candidates to go into whichever position they're written to go into? Now, he suspects that what he voted for, the yes that he voted for when he raised his hands on his book, was different to what everyone else saw in the conference and perhaps what President Xi saw in the conference. This is why he's so upset. We'll just continue being explained away. And now, all of a sudden, we're going to see, Xi Jin Ping looks over to his left, signals for his nearby aides, and someone's here to take him away. Now, what you might also hear is that maybe there were health issues. Now, regardless of the fact that Hu Jin Tao has grey hair, and that's fair enough, and he may not be the most sharpest mentally, he doesn't look that way. He doesn't look like he doesn't know what's going on in terms of just mentally. But I would say he's a bit confused about why his people were not elected this time round. And no one from his faction has been basically voted in this time at all, to his surprise. And what I can glean from this is that he expected some of his people to be voted in. And that is not the case. That's why he is looking quite shocked. And you can see Xi Jinping on Hu Jin Tao's right, on our left, we can see, is pretty indifferent to it. He seems to not be bothered by anything that's going on right here. So we can see he's being dragged quite reluctantly, right? We have two handlers trying to push him away or drag him away. Now he's quite reluctant. He's quite slow. He's trying to step back. Now he's touching Xi, going basically, what's going on? Are you aware of this? Perhaps Xi's nodding his head, and this is a really important one. On the left of Xi, or on Xi's right, is Li Keqiang, who is the number 2, and is actually Hu Jin Tao's person, very, very highly educated, right? And was potentially one to replace Xi when Xi's term was over. Now, the context behind this is that Li Keqiang has no position anymore in the Politburo Standing Committee, which is the highest committee. He's not in there. He's no longer the premier. He's going to be a nobody, frankly. Now, he, as well as the guy even further to his left, which is Wang Yang, who was also going to be probably number 2 or 3, they have no more positions all of a sudden. And this was against probably the expectation of the previous president Hu, who's being dragged away right now. And he'll go to Li Keqiang, tap him on the shoulder, maybe look after yourself, he's saying. Now he's gone. This footage, not shown throughout China, but has been mentioned. As I suppose Hu Jin Tao was unwell, had to be ushered away in newspapers. But the footage of this has not been shown in China. Now, why is this so dramatic? It's probably, you could say, a public purging. Xi has replaced the old guard or people he didn't like, and in such public fashion, and he's basically purged Hu Jin Tao in public, and so that he can't actually protest. And if you actually see how they vote, everyone, they ask who votes in support of it, and everyone raises their hand, and they actually ask who votes against these propositions, and if anyone votes against it, you have to put your hand up. But you could see that Hu Jin Tao was preparing to make a protest publicly, but he was already ushered out. Now, we're going to go through also, I think it's worth going through who Hu Jin Tao's people is being replaced by, and why the stock market is crashing these days in China and Hong Kong, and why, as a shareholder in some of Chinese shares, even though you might think I'm against China a lot of times, I do have some Chinese shares, predominantly Alibaba. I do think the business, without the political context, is a good business. E-commerce in the world's second largest economy is still important. It should be important, and shouldn't be underpriced. But you know what? I'm underwater of that, because the market and a lot of people agree. China's story about this economic miracle story, it's over. And I'm going to explain why by looking at the people he's replaced it by. Let's look at Li Keqiang, who is a technocrat, highly educated, is very knowledgeable about economics, and is very, how would I say it, liberal, and happy to work with the West, and is very pragmatic and cares about just the economics as opposed to the political infighting. So Li Keqiang, he is going to be replaced, right? This guy was kind of like second ranked. He's going to be replaced by, get this, a guy called Li Qiang. And I'm going to show you on screen their names. So we're going to look on the Chinese characters here. And that is Li Keqiang. And he's going to be replaced by Li Qiang. You'll notice that the characters are basically the same, except for the ke in the middle, right? Now, this Li Qiang has only really been serving, is famous for doing the lockdowns in Shanghai. And that's more or less it. He's looked after the province of Zhejiang, but now he's going to be elevated to basically number 2, and he's going to be the highest member, apart from Xi himself, in the Politburo Standing Committee, which is the highest echelon of the Communist Party. There are multiple echelons, layers before that. He's going to be bumped from more or less a mayor of Shanghai all the way to the very top. No, you could say, broad economic experience, geopolitical experience, nothing like that. He's going straight to the top because he's loyal to Xi. And this is a theme that's going to be repeated. No, it doesn't matter what they think about or how educated they are, how they want to improve the economy, improve the country, and so on and so forth, how pragmatic they are. No, it's whoever is loyal, and even experience doesn't matter. Let's continue going forward. Wang Yang is also a Hu Jin Tao person, and he was pretty high up. He looked after the state of, or the province of Guangdong, which is the main sort of, which contains Shenzhen and Guangzhou. So this is the manufacturing hub of China. So huge, so important economically. So he does have economic experience. He's been in the Politburo of the party since 2007. He's been in those high echelons for more than a decade, for 15 years, right? And the very highest Politburo Standing Committee for 5 years. He has experience, right? But he's being replaced. Well, not specifically by this guy. He's being replaced. He's out. He's nowhere near the top anymore. So two highly experienced personnel, whose people completely out. Here's an example. It's Zhaology, and he is. Let me just refresh my memory. Have a quick look. Oh yes, he was in charge of the anti-corruption drive for Xi. So basically, in charge of taking out people from the party who were not aligned, basically purging people, right? Using the excuse, perhaps, of corruption, to accuse certain politicians of corruption and take them out of the party. And these were probably the people that were loyal to Jiang Zemin or Hu Jin Tao, which are the previous presidents. So he was sort of he did all the dirty laundry for President Xi. And so in terms of economic experience, in terms of just experience in the different echelons rising up the ranks, that is not necessarily the case. It's not a clear trajectory, and there is no necessarily economic credentials to him apart from taking out Xi's political enemies. That's another thing. So what we can see is political players that allow Xi to do his power plays. They're not the people that are driving towards a better economic future for China. This is just a controversial opinion. If I say any more, YouTube will probably strike me down. This is pretty bang on, pretty hardcore in terms of just how brutal the assessment is. Now we're going to go to the next one, Wang Huning, and he is just an intellectual, a consultant type that's been around for all three leaders. He's just not loyal to anyone, and he cares, I suppose, only for himself. That's okay, I suppose, but he is an intellect, so I suppose that's pretty good. And then we have Tai Chi, who is who looked after Zhejiang, which is the same province as what Xi Jin Ping looked after before he took over the Beijing Olympics. He did a good job, and that's why he got promoted to become, president of the Communist Party in China, because he did such a great job in Beijing 2008. Now, anyway, this guy looked after Beijing also, and the most prominent thing that he did was he kicked out all the migrant workers. He evicted them from the city with not necessarily a place to go. He cleaned up the city and just extremely loyal to Xi. He hasn't been rising up the ranks. He hasn't looked after a province. And none of these guys have particularly, apart from the one previously, particularly high academic results. And what characterized the previous administrations, especially Hu, was they were technocrats, which kind of means they were very highly educated, very successful in management. They got to the positions because they're proven to be effective in their roles and very highly educated, very smart, right? It's based on results. These guys are based on what they can do for Xi politically, how loyal they are to him, and without necessarily experience or credentials or achievements under their name. And then we have Ding Xueshang, which this is really interesting because he's just been hanging around Xi since the very beginning. He's just been like a secretary, like an aide for Xi for more than a decade, but he's never held any high portfolio position. He's not looked after a province, which is like a state, or a city like Beijing or Shanghai. He's just been hanging around. And now he is in the top 7 of the Politburo Standing Committee and replacing all the previous experienced people before him. Again, extremely loyal to Xi. But these guys have, again, no experience. They're not pragmatic. They don't know economics. This is what's the future of China. Just political, potentially infighting. Super loyal to Xi. And then the last one is Li Shi, who is... was actually, I would have to grant him, he was looking after the province of Guangdong. So that's a very economically important city in China. Guangdong is where all the factories are. But again, extremely loyal. But even if you're looking after important province like Zhejiang or Guangdong, it doesn't necessarily mean you should jump straight to the Politburo Standing Committee. There are still different levels you should be going to instead of jumping all the way to the top. So what she did was he just pulled everyone that was extremely loyal to him straight to the top. And they're not necessarily experienced or economically sound and they're not economically focused. In fact, why the stock markets are crashing is because she said economics is not the most important. In fact, they withdrew the GDP numbers and they said we're just going to focus on GDP per capita, something to that order, but not GDP anymore. She said we're not going to focus on GDP, we're going to focus on rebalancing the country. That's code for we're going to go communist. We don't care about growing our country. We don't care about growing our country necessarily bigger than the US economy and being the most economically powerful. I just want I'm paraphrasing but she just wants more control, more stability for the country under his rule, right? He doesn't care about economics. So this could go very catastrophic because the last guy that was willing to sacrifice the economy for his position in the country, right, and eliciting the ideas of socialism and communism, the last guy to do that was Mao Zedong, right? So this is basically we're repeating history. And during that time, hundreds of millions of people died from starvation, infighting. We had a cultural revolution, great leap forward, just extreme disaster economically for the country, which meant by the 70s, China was poorer than some of the poorest places in sub-Saharan Africa. The country was starving to death, quite literally, one of the poorest countries on earth. You wouldn't know that now, but only in the 70s, this was true. Less than 50 years ago, they're one of the poorest places on planet Earth. What a change. But we're going to reverse all of that. And the idea that China's going to replace the US is going to take over the West, we like that not to happen, but it looks like Xi is almost throwing in the towel. And now, in his 2-hour speech, taking his third term, he talked about security far more than economics. Now, what does that mean? That's probably code that this guy doesn't necessarily care about, I suppose, the wholesome activity of becoming rich and economics. Now, there's a lot of people that don't find that appealing anymore for some reason. They're not very capitalist these days. They think, we don't want to just pursue money for the sake, and disregard the environment. Doesn't matter, right? This guy says we don't need the economy. We just need to have a security, or actually, we just need to feel like we're powerful for some reason. Now, I could see how this goes. Let's say China's economy goes, down the toilet. What's Xi gonna do? He's gonna start blaming people. And the West is having a more and more antagonistic relationship towards China. And China the same to the West. I mean, it's not hard to see how this will deteriorate. Xi can just simply blame the West for not participating in trade. Then secondly, he'll blame the West and then he can initiate a war, right? Maybe he'll take Taiwan. Now, Taiwan is the semiconductor capital of the world. Both sides, if we can say the sides, the US and China, they need Taiwan, what Taiwan's making, the semiconductors, right? So they're pretty much the only place that matters. Now, if China takes Taiwan, US can't let that happen because they will lose the semiconductors and we won't have the computer chips to function. Likewise, US gobbles up Taiwan and builds stronger and stronger relationships and maybe cuts China out from Taiwan, then China can't survive economically and advance without those microchips, those semiconductors. So, and the other thing is if there are doubts against Xi's power, right, people undermining him, he'll go, I know what we can do to get more political power. We can take on Taiwan. And next thing you know, we could be having another world war? Yeah, I suppose. I mean, that's if you're assuming we're in a world war right now with Russia. But, the Russian on the Western front, That's not slowing down. There are no off-ramps with the war against Ukraine, right? It's escalating, not de-escalating. There is no exit right now. And so that's going to simmer, maybe come to a boil over the next couple of years. And then you have the pressure of Xi. Xi doesn't have much to stand on economically. You know, I know people in the country, they're not pleased about where the country is going. I've been to there before President Xi. I can tell you the tone of that place over 10 years ago was nothing. Oh, my screen's off. Was nothing like what it is now. It was all about economics, all about growth. It was the dream of overtaking the US. Now it's the dream of, I don't necessarily know, infighting. The dream of Xi to stay on top at all costs. And if he doesn't stay there, he could lose his life. So he has to do that. China internally has raised the stakes to the max that you can imagine. And there's not been a leader as powerful as Xi since potentially Hitler or Mao Zedong himself. This is a very historic moment. We're seeing something that's not necessarily new. We saw this coming before, but now we've really cemented this. This has really been crystallized as something that's happened in history. So that's why, that's my take on things. I hope you got a lot out of it. If you liked the video, please hit the like and subscribe and share with your friends. This is my take on it, but the ramifications in the next couple of decades is just like, it's so hard to explain. It's impossible to capture how this could change the trajectory of history. The probability of war between the West and the East has just increased by, God knows how much, right? This idea that China's gonna be the economic powerhouse, the economic miracle that was China over the last 50 years. I can tell you 20 years ago in China, I was taking showers there, right? From a bucket of water, right? We boiled some water on the coals. We poured the hot water, mixed it in, warm water, and just, dunk it on ourselves. That was 20 years ago. We didn't have fridges, right? We go to the market, we try to, eat it before it rotted, right? That was China 20, 25 years ago in the late 90s. Bikes everywhere. Now there's no bikes. It's just cars and fancy, I don't know, Ferraris and stuff. A life, that's, and we're gonna go back to that again. That's crazy stuff. One more thing I'd like to end on, hopefully this is not too controversial video. And, I make this video knowing, the fact that I am probably not gonna head back to China anytime soon. Even though I am in some ways, especially now, I miss it. I know people there, my family there, and I'm probably just not gonna go there ever again, possibly in my lifetime. And that's quite sad. And the China that I knew, the China that was optimistic and grew like wildfire, and was a place of hope, that's no more. And I think this is an official, a point in history which signifies that. So anyway, I hope you got something out of that and it shapes how you see or where the world is going. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. It may not be about China, probably about economics again. A lot of things happening. Anyway, thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one. Bye then. Share.